away from the pump. Hands up now. I need ID for impersonating an official.
I'm a federal judge leaving court. What's your legal reason for detaining me?
Don't argue. Turn around and keep your hands visible while I verify.
Step away from the pump and put your hands where I can see them. The command cracked across the gas station lot so sharply that even the hum of the highway seemed to drop away. A black and white cruiser sat angled across two spaces with its lights strobing against the windows, splashing blue and red over the woman standing beside Pump 6. She had one hand on her card, the other on a bottle of water she had just taken from the convenience store. A long black robe moved in the night wind around her ankles. Her hair was pinned back. Her expression was tired, not frightened yet, just stunned by the speed of it. 30 seconds earlier, it had been an ordinary stop at the end of a brutal day. She had left a federal courthouse after an emergency hearing that ran long past sunset, skipped dinner, and pulled into the only station still open on the edge of town because the fuel light had turned on 10 miles back. She kept the robe on because she was alone, exhausted, and planning to drive straight home after filling up. She looked, to anyone paying attention, like exactly what she was, an older black woman on her way back from work, carrying herself with the quiet steadiness of someone used to rooms going silent when she entered them. Officer Daniel Mercer did not see any of that, or he saw it and decided it did not matter. He got out with one hand on his holster and the other already pointing at her chest. "Take the costume off," he said. "Now." The woman blinked once, as if she wanted to be sure she had heard him right. "Officer, I'm pumping gas." I said, "Hands up." People inside the station turned toward the glass. A man in a landscaping uniform froze halfway through paying for cigarettes. Two teenagers near the ice freezer stopped talking and lifted their phones without even thinking about it. Across the lot, a truck driver leaned out his window and watched the cruiser lights flash over the woman's robe, over her face, over the bottle of water still gripped in her hand. She slowly raised both hands. "Is there a reason I'm being detained?" Mercer laughed, short and ugly. "Don't do that. Don't start with the fake lawyer talk. We got a call about someone impersonating an official and harassing customers." The woman's eyes moved to the store, then back to him. Her voice stayed level. "I have not harassed anyone. You expect me to believe you're a judge?" Mercer said, looking her up and down as though the word itself offended him. "At a gas station? In that?" "It is not a costume," she said. He took 2 steps closer. "Then what is it? A robe? For Halloween?" The silence that followed was worse than shouting. It was the kind that lets everyone around feel the line being crossed in real time. The teenagers filming looked at each other. The cashier inside came out halfway through the door and stopped under the yellow light, eyes narrowing as if he had just realized this was no misunderstanding that was about to smooth itself over. The woman lowered her chin slightly. "Officer, I am asking again. Why am I being detained?" Mercer's jaw tightened. He had expected fear, apology, confusion, some performance of submission that would let him dominate the moment and move on. What he got instead was composure. Calm questions. Precise words. The one thing men like him always take personally, a refusal to collapse. "Because I said so," he snapped. "Turn around." She did not move. "Am I under arrest?" "Turn around." "On what charge?" Mercer grabbed her wrist. There was a visible recoil through the crowd, the kind that happens before anyone speaks. His fingers locked around her arm, and the water bottle fell, hit the pavement, rolled under the pump. The woman flinched from the force, not because she was weak, but because Mercer had decided to make the answer physical. He yanked her toward the cruiser. She tried to brace herself and nearly lost her balance on the oil-stained concrete. "Stop resisting," he barked, though she had not resisted. "Anything." "I am not resisting," she said louder now. "You are hurting me." That sentence changed the air. People stopped being spectators and became witnesses. A woman at the next pump shouted, "She's not doing anything." Mercer didn't even look at her. He shoved the robed woman against the hood of the cruiser hard enough to make the metal thud. One hand forced between her shoulder blades, he fumbled for his cuffs and said, almost casually, "You people always think clothes make you untouchable." There it was. Naked now. Not procedure. Not caution. Not confusion. Contempt. The woman turned her face slightly against the hood. "State your name and badge number." Mercer tightened his grip. "You don't get to demand anything from me. I am requesting your name and badge number." He wrenched her arm higher until her breath caught. "And I'm requesting you learn your place." The teenagers were still filming. So was the truck driver now. The cashier stepped all the way out of the store and said, "Officer, she came in, bought water, that's it. She didn't bother anybody." Mercer ignored him. He snapped one cuff onto her wrist. The metal clicked across the lot like a gun being loaded. That was the moment the second patrol unit arrived. Officer Lena Ruiz stepped out and took in the scene in one sweep. The woman in judicial robes bent over a hood, the crowd, the phones, Mercer's face flushed with the excitement of unchecked power. Ruiz looked from the robe to the woman's hands to the pump nozzle still hanging loose from the open gas tank. She hesitated. It lasted maybe 1 second. It was long enough to show she knew something was wrong. "Dan," she said quietly, "what's the charge?" "Impersonation. Disorderly. Maybe obstruction." Ruiz looked at the woman again. "Ma'am, do you have identification?" "Yes," the woman said, her cheek still pressed to the hood. "In my left pocket. If he removes his hand from my shoulder, I can tell you my name." Mercer gave a sharp laugh. "Here we go." Ruiz stepped closer. Dan, he finally eased back, not out of conscience, but because now another officer was standing there and the performance had an audience inside the system too. The woman straightened carefully, one wrist cuffed behind her, and nodded toward the folded leather wallet visible in the deep pocket of her robe. Ruiz removed it and opened it. The crowd didn't hear what happened next. They saw it. They saw Ruiz's eyes flick down once, then back up fast, then down again. They saw the blood drain from her face. They saw the way she looked at Mercer, no longer irritated, now alarmed. Real alarm. Institutional alarm. Career-ending alarm. She held up the identification with both hands like it had suddenly become fragile. "Judge," Ruiz said. Mercer frowned. "What?" Ruiz swallowed. "This is Judge Naomi Ellison." The name hit some people immediately and others a second later. On the side of the interstate, with neon beer signs flickering behind them, Officer Daniel Mercer had just handcuffed the chief federal judge for the district. The same judge whose rulings had made national news. The same judge who had built her reputation taking civil rights cases nobody else wanted. The same judge who had sworn in mayors, sanctioned departments, and spent 2 decades forcing public institutions to answer for what they did when nobody was supposed to be watching. Mercer stared at the ID as if the plastic itself were lying to him. "No," he said, too fast. "No way." Judge Ellison slowly turned toward him, one cuff still hanging from her left wrist, the other swinging loose. There was a red mark beginning to rise along her cheek where the hood had caught her skin. Her voice was controlled, but not soft anymore. "You asked if this was a costume," she said. "Now you know." For the first time that night, Mercer looked afraid. He reached for the cuff key with fumbling fingers. "Judge, I didn't realize." "No," she said. "You didn't care." He froze. All around them, the phones kept recording. Ruiz uncuffed her immediately and stepped back. Mercer tried again, the tone changing now, scrambling for safe ground. "There was a call. We were responding to a report. I was just trying to verify." Judge Ellison lifted her wrist, the metal imprint visible under the lights. "You accused me of impersonating an official without evidence. You put your hands on me without lawful cause. You ignored witnesses. You mocked my office. You used race to explain your conduct. And you did it in public." Mercer glanced at the crowd, finally understanding what the crowd meant. Not noise. Not pressure. Evidence. He tried the oldest retreat in the book. "If there's been a misunderstanding, Judge Ellison said, looking directly at him, "is getting the wrong pump number." This was an abuse of authority. Nobody spoke after that. Even the highway seemed distant. Mercer stood there with the handcuff key still in his hand, his chest rising too fast, while Ruiz called a supervisor with a voice that sounded thin and formal and already defensive. The crowd did what crowds do when they know history has just turned in front of them. They stayed. Within 20 minutes, 3 more cruisers arrived, then a watch commander, then a deputy chief in plain clothes who got out of an unmarked SUV and went pale the moment he recognized Judge Ellison. He started apologizing before he fully reached her. She let him finish. Then she asked one question. "Has his body camera been secured?" The deputy chief stopped talking. That question opened the second half of the story. Because the body camera was still on. So was Ruiz's. So were half a dozen cell phones. The station itself had exterior security cameras that captured the stop from 2 angles, including the moment Mercer first approached Judge Ellison with his hand already on his weapon. Inside the store, the register camera had audio clear enough to catch the cashier telling dispatch later that nobody had been threatened, nobody had been harassed, and the only unusual thing about the woman in the robe was that she looked like she had come straight from court. By midnight, the footage was locked. By dawn, copies existed in more places than the department could control. And then the records started surfacing. The original 911 call turned out to be vague, almost useless. A man had reported a suspicious person dressed like a judge at the station. No threats, no weapon, no criminal act. When dispatch logs were pulled, it became clear Mercer had upgraded the tone on his own over the radio, telling Ruiz en route that he had a possible fraud artist refusing commands. That language had shaped the response before anyone else ever saw Judge Ellison. It also gave investigators their first hard glimpse of intent. By the next morning, local reporters had the bystander footage. By lunchtime, national outlets had it too. The most replayed clip was not the handcuffing. It was the moment Mercer said, "Take the costume off." The second most replayed was what came after the reveal. "Judge, I didn't realize," followed by Judge Ellison answering, "You didn't care." People repeated that line across every platform in the country because it stripped the defense down to what it was. Not a mistake. A hierarchy. He thought he could humiliate a black woman in public because he believed there would be no consequence if she were ordinary. What broke the department open was not just that he was wrong. It was that he had been wrong before. Complaints began resurfacing within 48 hours. A school principal who had been shoved against her own car during a traffic stop. A postal worker threatened with arrest for attitude after asking why he had been pulled over. A retired Army sergeant whose son uploaded an old video of Mercer calling him "boy" during a roadside search that produced nothing. Internal affairs files showed multiple citizen complaints over 4 years, all closed without discipline. In 2 cases, supervisors had accepted Mercer's report even when witness statements contradicted him. One complaint had been withdrawn after the complainant was later charged with resisting arrest. The charge was dismissed. The department had kept the file anyway. Then came the body camera review. Investigators found Mercer routinely activated authority before articulating cause. He escalated encounters verbally within seconds. He used phrases like "you people" and "your kind" often enough that even the city attorney stopped trying to call them isolated. In one traffic stop, he can be heard telling a Latino driver, "If you don't want problems, don't act like you belong in one." In another, he jokes to a fellow officer after a search comes up empty, "Better luck next time." None of it had mattered while the targets were citizens with limited reach. Now the target had a name powerful enough to drag every buried pattern into the open. 3 days after the gas station stop, Judge Ellison appeared at a press conference outside the federal courthouse. She wore a navy suit, not her robe. The bruise on her wrist had darkened. Reporters shouted questions from behind barricades. Cameras from every major network pointed at the steps. She did not dramatize what happened. She did not need to. Her restraint made it worse for the people hoping the story would cool. "I was not harmed because of confusion," she said. "I was harmed because an officer believed dignity, legality, and restraint were optional when dealing with someone he had already decided did not deserve them. What happened to me was witnessed. What happens to others usually is not." That sentence changed the frame again. The story was no longer about a judge being mistreated. It was about how many non-judges had endured the same thing without cameras, titles, or immediate credibility. The personal became legal. The legal became institutional. The U.S. Attorney's Office announced a civil rights review. The State Bureau opened an independent criminal investigation into unlawful detention, false reporting, and official misconduct. The city suspended Mercer without pay, then placed the watch commander and internal affairs lieutenant on administrative leave when emails revealed prior warnings about Mercer's conduct had been minimized to avoid staffing disruptions. The police chief, already under pressure, tried to defend the department in a televised interview and made the mistake of calling the stop "regrettable optics." By nightfall, that phrase was everywhere, attached to clips of handcuffs, bruises, and testimony from people the department had ignored for years. The station cashier testified first before the Civilian Review Board. He was steady, precise, impossible to shake. He said Mercer arrived looking angry before he had any reason to be angry. One of the teenagers turned over the full unedited phone video, including the seconds before Mercer touched Judge Ellison. In it, she can be heard asking, "Am I free to leave?" He answers, "Not unless I say so." There is still no articulated crime. The truck driver provided a wide-angle recording that showed Mercer jerking her arm upward after she had already complied. Ruiz, under oath, admitted she had immediate doubts about probable cause, but failed to intervene before the first cuff was applied. Her testimony did not save Mercer, but it sealed him. Then the paperwork collapsed. Mercer's incident report, filed just after midnight, stated Judge Ellison adopted an aggressive, bladed stance, reached toward her waistband, and verbally identified herself as a judge in a manner consistent with delusional or fraudulent behavior. None of it matched the video. Not one piece. The body cam showed her holding a water bottle and a credit card. The security footage showed no aggressive movement. Witnesses all described her as calm. What had begun as bias had matured into fabrication, and fabrication is where administrative scandal turns criminal. The grand jury moved quickly after that. Mercer was indicted on charges of false imprisonment under color of law, assault, filing a false official report, and violating civil rights. The district attorney did not hedge. The badge does not grant immunity for humiliation, force, or lies, she said. The city, facing a federal pattern and practice inquiry, settled Judge Ellison's civil claim before trial for a figure so large it triggered emergency budget meetings and public outrage. She directed the money into a court-supervised civil liberties fund and legal aid expansion, which only deepened the contrast between what had been done to her and what she chose to do with the aftermath. But the consequences did not stop with Mercer. The police chief resigned 2 weeks before the city council was scheduled to vote on his removal. The watch commander was terminated for failing to correct a false report. The internal affairs lieutenant lost his post after investigators found he had closed multiple Mercer complaints without interviewing key witnesses. The department entered a federal consent decree mandating bias monitoring, body camera audits, independent complaint review, and supervisory reforms that stripped commanders of the quiet discretion they had used to bury misconduct. Training manuals were rewritten. Stop and detain policies were revised. Early warning systems were installed to flag complaint patterns officers once survived through paperwork alone. Mercer's trial lasted 8 days. The prosecution did not overreach. They let the video do what the system had refused to do for years: tell the truth without permission. Jurors watched the stop from every angle. They heard Mercer say, "Take the costume off." They heard him say, "You people always think clothes make you untouchable." They watched him claim danger where none existed. They watched him discover her identity and pivot instantly from force to apology. And they understood what mattered most. His behavior did not change because the facts changed. His behavior changed because her status became undeniable. The guilty verdict came back in under 4 hours. When it was read, Mercer sat perfectly still, as if he believed stillness could preserve some fragment of the authority he had worn like armor his whole adult life. It could not. He was let out not in uniform, but in county restraints, past the same cameras he once assumed he controlled. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. His name was entered into the National Decertification Index. The judge who sentenced him was not Naomi Ellison. It did not need to be. The sentence was 18 months in state custody on the assault and false imprisonment counts, followed by federal prosecution exposure that would shadow him even after release. His pension was contested. His appeals failed. Judge Ellison never turned the story into personal revenge. She returned to the bench. But the image of that night followed the city in ways no press release could contain. A woman in a robe under gas station lights, handcuffed for the crime of existing in authority where a racist officer believed she did not belong. The reason the case struck so hard was not that a federal judge had been humiliated. It was that the whole country understood, instantly, what would have happened if she had not been one. Without the badge on the other side of the equation, without the title in her pocket, there might have been no correction, no camera review, no grand jury, no reform. Just one more report. One more lie. One more citizen told to move on. Instead, the lie hit a wall it could not bend. And when it did, everything behind it became visible. One stop at one gas station exposed a chain of cowardice stretching from one officer's prejudice to an entire department's willingness to protect it. The confrontation that began with a sneer about a costume ended with a conviction, a federal investigation, department-wide reform, and public proof that abuse of power can survive for years right up until the moment it reaches the wrong witness, the wrong camera, the wrong target, and the truth finally refuses to stay buried. That is what made the consequences irreversible. Mercer did not just lose his badge. He lost the protection of silence. The supervisors who covered for him did not just lose positions. They lost the discretion that let them decide whose pain counted. The department did not just suffer embarrassment. It was forced into permanent oversight because one ugly encounter revealed the system exactly as it had been operating when nobody important was supposed to be watching. Judge Ellison had asked for one simple thing that night: the officer's name and badge number. In the end, the country learned both. It learned the department's name too. It learned the price of contempt dressed up as procedure. And it learned that justice, when it finally arrives, is most powerful when it is public, documented, and impossible to reverse. If you believe abuse of power should always end in accountability, comment below and subscribe.